Welcome to our channel, Chronicles of Strange History. We will tell you about the Westall UFO Encounter. It's November 1966 in Westall, Australia. And one evening after school, a group of students are standing around chatting. It's just another day in the life of teenagers, until all of a sudden they see something strange descending from the sky. Inside it are three small figures with large heads, bug-like eyes, and spindly arms and legs. This is a flying saucer. One of them is already dead, its body slumped over in a seated position. The other two aren't doing much better. They're clearly sick and barely clinging to life. The object appears to be metallic, about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, and shaped like a giant cigar. It descends slowly and silently before touching down behind some trees. There were three small figures standing next to the craft. Then one of the aliens suddenly sat up, turned towards them, and beckoned with a finger. Startled, John and Peter ran away as fast as they could. They didn't stop running until they were far away from the school. They were humanoid in shape, but sickly looking with large heads and big bulbous eyes. They glanced back and saw the alien standing up and pointing directly at them. It was trying to communicate with them, but they didn't know what to do. So they kept running. They were about 3 feet tall with large heads, big eyes, and skinny bodies. One of them was lying on the ground and didn't seem to be moving. The other two were kneeling and making strange noises, so they kept it to themselves. However, their secret didn't stay hidden for long. Some people said that they appeared to be trying to communicate with them, while others claimed that they were making a distress call. So eventually they went home and tried to forget about what they had seen. But the next day, more witnesses came forward with similar stories. There were no signs of a crash, no strange objects, and no dead bodies. The police interviewed the students, but their story was so bizarre that nobody believed them. Whatever they were trying to say, nobody could understand them. Some people claim to have seen UFOs and aliens in the same area. Some even claim that they have been abducted by aliens and experimented on. Surely they would want the world to know, right? Well, maybe not. There are a number of reasons why the government might want to keep this information secret. All of these stories have been kept under wraps and suppressed by the government. The local newspaper reported that a group of students had seen a UFO land in a vacant lot near the school. Until next time. Soon, other students started coming forward with similar stories of their own. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for more content. Thank you for watching. If this were made public, it would cause mass panic and chaos. People would be afraid of what the aliens might do and how they might react. The government also knows that we are not alone in the universe. It was unlikely that they would fabricate a story about seeing a UFO. It would also raise a lot of ethical questions about how we treat other intelligent life forms. Finally, the government is aware that aliens have been visiting us for centuries. However, the police also noted that there were no witnesses apart from the students themselves. Each being was between 3 and 4 feet tall, with thin arms and legs that seemed too long for their bodies. Perhaps they do know that aliens exist, and they just keeping it secret from us to protect us. Or perhaps they're lying to us, and there are aliens visiting our planet right now. We may never know the truth. If this were made public, it would send shockwaves around the world. People would be afraid of what the aliens might be up to, and what their intentions might be. One of them was slumped over in a seated position, clearly dead. The other two weren't much better. The incident was eventually forgotten about, and the students were left to wonder if anyone would ever believe them. They also claimed that they had seen 3 aliens exit the craft, and that one of them was dead. The police took the report seriously and sent out a team to investigate. They were kneeling and making weird gurgling noises, obviously very sick. According to the official police report, it was one of the most bizarre incidents of suspected extraterrestrial contact ever investigated by authorities in this country. The only thing more intriguing than the alleged sighting itself was the subsequent cover-up, which raises serious questions about what the government knows about UFOs. Curiosity gets the better of them, and they go to investigate. But when they get closer, they realize that this is no ordinary object. Outside, the world was quiet and peaceful. But inside, their minds were racing. What had they just seen? Were those really aliens? And if so, why were they visiting Earth? The kids stand there watching in stunned silence for a few seconds before deciding to run away. When they look back, the spaceship has vanished, and so have the aliens. The object had been shaped like a giant cigar and was floating silently, not making a sound. Others said it resembled a giant flashlight or a torch. The object finally landed in a vacant lot near the school, and people rushed to investigate. What they found shocked them. As it descended, people began to notice its unusual shape and color. It was unlike any plane or helicopter they had ever seen before. Well, that's the story anyway. And if you ask me, it sounds pretty convincing. Among them were John and his younger brother Peter, who were only 13 years old. Suddenly, they spotted something odd falling from the sky. It appeared to be about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle and looked like a giant cigar. It floated past the school and landed in an open area behind some trees. The Westall UFO incident took place on November 1966 at Westall High School in Melbourne, Australia. So let's dive into the details. On that fateful afternoon, several students were hanging around outside the school fence after class. The boys stood there watching, completely stunned. Then curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to investigate. At first, they couldn't believe their eyes. Hovering in front of them was a silver disc-shaped object about 20 feet wide, like nothing they had ever seen before. It was smooth and shiny, almost like a mirror. Then they noticed something even stranger. The boys stood there mesmerized for a few seconds, unsure of what to do. As they ran, they could hear the alien making strange clicking noises and feel its intense gaze boring into their backs. Finally, they reached their house and burst through the door, slamming it behind them. Safe at last. Or so they thought. The boys couldn't stop thinking about the incident, but they knew that nobody would believe their story. On the same day, 2 teachers and a school caretaker had allegedly witnessed a strange object descending from the sky. Some people described it as looking like a large silver tube or a cigar. There were 3 strange creatures standing next to the craft. As people approached, the creatures started making clicking sounds and gesturing wildly. People stood around watching for a few minutes, but the creatures didn't seem to be in any danger. It became clear that this wasn't just a one-off incident. Something strange was going on, and people wanted answers. So they turned to the police. According to the students, the UFO was about 20 feet in diameter and looked like a giant cigar. However, when they arrived at the school, they couldn't find any evidence of a UFO or aliens. The police report stated that the students were known to be well-behaved and of good character, and without any physical evidence to support their claims, they were unable to take the case any further. However, the story didn't end there. In the years since the Westall UFO incident, many people have come forward with similar stories of their own. Others say that they have been in contact with the government and have been offered money to keep quiet. Why? Well, that's the million-dollar question. Why would the government want to cover up the existence of aliens? For one thing, the government knows that there are aliens visiting our planet. If this were made public, it would change everything we know about our place in the cosmos. They've been observing us, studying our culture and technology. In the end, the truth is that we don't know what the government is hiding. But one thing is for sure, the Westall UFO incident is one of the most bizarre and mysterious events in history.